Welcome, everyone, to the next installment of Pipeline's KnowledgeCast webinar series. I'm Scott St. John, Pipeline's Managing Editor, and I'll be walking through this important topic with some of the industry's top thought leaders. Today's webinar topic is a follow-up to our last KnowledgeCast, where we discussed key areas of transformation, trends like IoT and network virtualization. The key takeaway from that discussion was that transformation will have a broad, sweeping impact to systems and customers. These systems will have to evolve, and new automation technologies such as artificial intelligence and blockchain will be needed to help keep up with the pace of change, drive operational efficiencies, and better serve customers. The question is how? The good news is we've put together a panel of experts to help answer that question. Joining us today are Rupesh Chachki, Associate Vice President, Product Marketing and Management at AT&T, John Abraham, Principal Analyst of Monetization Platforms and Digital Transformation at Analysys Mason, Rick Levino, Director, Technology Strategy at Microsoft, Mary Clark, Chief Marketing Officer at Synchronoss, Bill Cannon, Chairman and Chief Revenue Officer at Federos, Matt Shanahan, Chief Operating Officer at Globys, Shahin Arfizada, Chief Operating Officer at Ziotis, Rhett Williams, President of EMEA at Genie Technologies, and David Deng, Co-Founder and Chief Technology Officer at OSSera. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's KnowledgeCast is being brought to you by AT&T, Genie Technologies, Federos, and Microsoft. I want to thank them for their support of Pipeline and for making today's webinar possible. I also want to take a moment to remind everyone to submit any questions they have for panelists in the Q&A window on the webinar console. We have a lot of great panelists, and this is your chance to have your questions answered by the industry's leading experts. We'll be answering them in a live Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's KnowledgeCast webinar. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get into it. To gain some perspective, we're going to start with Rupesh from AT&T and then turn to John at Analysys Mason. Rupesh, as an industry-leading service provider, what do you see as the key drivers of digital transformation? What are you hearing from your customers, and what's AT&T's vision for the network of the future?
That's a great question. We are living in the the digital economy, the gigabyte economy. We're living in a world where transformation is very important to customers, enterprises, whether they're very large global customers or small, medium businesses, right? To start with, what's happening in the industry is digitization is a lot more than just having the ability to do e-commerce over a website or kind of connecting with your end user. It's all about taking the business processes and enabling them with your supply chain, with your distribution, with your retail, with your storefronts, with your customers and the ecosystem that you participate in. We are seeing tremendous amount of global IP traffic growth, right? And that traffic growth is continuing, and a lot of it is powered by what we're seeing with IoT, the endpoints, the devices, the sensors, the communication that needs to take place between the edge to the cloud or between the edge to the edge, right? Software centricity becomes the core enabler to this, right? In terms of software allows us and the customers to have flexibility and scale. It allows us to deliver on the business outcomes that are needed. What's also happening in the networking space is networking is cool again with some transformation on how the cloud space is being adopted. The wide area networks are looking very different. At the core of it is security, right? In terms of making sure that as you digitize it, how you are keeping your security platforms in place and ensuring that all of the transactions and the business processes and the data is highly secured. So pervasive security, end-to-end, very important, and that's one of the key drivers that we see. Last but not least, right, artificial intelligence. We are just on the surface of it, but you will see a lot more automation driven by it. There are many subtending topics, whether it is machine learning, whether it is data, whether it is looking at automation, virtualization to be driving that, and with virtual reality, augmented reality, tremendous amount of information is being kind of created, and then software is making decisions on how to take care of it. So that whole sort of, end user experience and automation is very, very important, right?
That's right. And I'm seeing quite a bit of the, we're going to touch on a lot of those topics further on in the webinar. But let me kind of take a step back. What does this mean for AT&T's customers?
So we feel we're living in a very exciting sort of, era, right? We call it the golden age in terms of, as I mentioned, networking is cool again. What's happening with the business transformation is all fueled by intelligent networks with our sort of, edge-to-edge vision and how we're going about it, right? So when we interact with our customers through multiple platforms, we hear day in, day out about their transformation stories, the innovations that they are driving in their businesses, in their industries to be competitive, but also differentiate whether it is the end user experience, whether it is the business process that they are trying to sort of, drive value and cost out. So if you think about, how we are getting the feedback and what the feedback is all about, it's around edge to cloud, right? That how do the locations and the endpoints are connecting and having a data flow and shifting workflows from edge to cloud and vice versa. With that comes a lot around traffic optimization, right? So the intelligence is all around how do I optimize the traffic, mission criticality, and high availability designs that are then driving the ability to do internet offload or more sort of, localized offload of the traffic. So again, as I mentioned previously, security at the core of it, but optimization of that traffic is important. Customers are looking for flexibility and control, right? It is all about give me options where I can do mix and match of my applications, give me choices on the platform that enables me to kind of scale, but also delivers a future-proof, option, right, or a platform that is future-proof. And last but not least, when you go through a transformation, being a trusted provider advisor is very, very important. We work with, a lot of customers in a lot of different sort of, verticals, whether it is a manufacturing, whether it is healthcare, whether it is finance, whether it is retail, the continuum goes on. And having a level of, trust in terms of how should one go about the transformations, the lessons that are learned, the architectures that are evolving, and the scale and the stability that we provide with the customer networks is very important. So at the end of the day, it's about the optimization, it's about edge to cloud, it's about the flexibility and control, an intelligent platform that delivers on the value proposition that we have already sort of, discussed, right? Let's talk a little bit about the increasing complexity, right, which is, as we discussed, a lot of endpoints, IoT endpoints, devices, sensory, customers have, multiple collaboration tools, productivity tools that are taking place. There is a mobile workforce. So the cost complexity is significantly increasing at the edge of the network, right? So whether it's on the local area network, the LAN side, or whether it's on the cloud side, there is a lot of, shift and adoption strategies that are being put in place, right? So for us, it's all about taking this cost complexity, working through the innovation with software-defined networking, network function virtualization, software-defined wide area networking, cloud technologies, and bringing a solution which is all about the edge-to-edge vision, right? So when we think about as a global service provider, we think about it from an edge-to-edge perspective, which is converged and simplified at the customer edge. We have core networking value proposition. We're expanding that with intelligent platforms that are smart and extensible and enabling our customers to adopt cloud with secure access and kind of better performance, right? So it's all about edge-to-edge and driving the data, the security, the intelligence, and the future-proof platforms.
Thanks, Rupesh. What are the key challenges you're seeing?
So in the challenge space, I think, a couple of things. One is obviously the customers have to work through the transformation in terms of what is the strategy, what is the vision, where do they want to be from a start and the end perspective, right? And it's a journey. It doesn't happen in 1 day or 2 days. It's something that has to go through a very systematic approach of architecture, planning, and execution. But a lot of it is driven around what are the choice points? What are the decisions? We work with customers to ensure that we tie all of that back to business outcomes, which is what is it that ultimately we want to achieve? What does the customer want to achieve? And then we can work through the challenges as we have the definition around the business outcomes and where the North Star is and where the endpoint end vision is, right? So that's it one area in terms of having a clear sort of, viewpoint on the starting and the endpoint and where the future lies. The second area, I think, is there is a lot of, probably newness of the technology, which then drives a level of confusion, right? So collectively as an industry, we're doing a lot of work to educate across the board, which is more around sort of, what is software-defined networking all about? What are the value proposition that it delivers? I touched upon future-proof platforms, intelligent platforms, and how do we enable those, right? So the education and the understanding is very, very important, and we see that as an opportunity that the industry as a whole has to continue to invest in. With, leading edge technologies comes with a lot of different sort of, ways of doing things, right? For example, software-defined wide area networking, or SD-WAN, is very hot in the marketplace right now. It provides a lot of intelligence and application-aware networking. It is very feature-rich. So understanding what all are the capabilities and having the ability to leverage and have the right kind of designs to then deliver to the business outcomes, right? So working through those challenges, turning them into opportunities, and delivering at global scale is what we see day in, day out with our customers.
Thanks, Rupesh. There's certainly several facets to this transformation. As you mentioned, it's bringing that innovation to market. It's the customer experience and the priorities on their transformation journey. And then, of course, there's transformation at the operator level, both technically as well as culturally. And to help us answer some of those questions and address them from another perspective is John Abraham from Analysys Mason. John, Analysys Mason has been doing a lot of research in terms of measuring the digital transformation of service providers. What metrics and functional areas does Analysys Mason use to measure digital readiness? And what should service providers consider when planning their transformation journey? And what observations can you share about these service providers and their motivations?
Thank you, Scott. So yes, Analysys Mason has been putting in considerable amount of research into unpacking the whole digital transformation narrative. I think it's fair to say that digital transformation is quite an ambiguous phrase today. There is no consensus in the industry on what it really is. We believe it is essentially a business and operations transformation that is mandated and driven by software. Now, to understand, there are obviously different facets to digital transformation, but to understand what is going on, especially from a customer experience index, we have designed and developed something we call the DIXI, which is short for Digital Experience Index, where we actually track the maturity of the operator's front-end systems, where they are today in terms of a number of different factors that are criteria that enable a more digitized customer engagement. And we rank them on these factors. So we have developed that model, and that's certainly part of the research that we do. And we have leaned on the research and the findings from that and other sources to actually come up with some key criteria that we think are useful from a digital transformation perspective. So one key aspect is the slide in front of you here, which actually looks at the different competing options in front of the operator from a strategic investment perspective. So obviously, infrastructure is quite high on that list, especially around 5G. But digital transformation actually falls on the southwest of that figure, and it lies between extension of services and improvement of efficiency. And that in some ways is also the boundary that we have for the broader digital transformation definition itself. The key takeaway from this figure, from this particular figure, is that operators obviously have a lot of other investment options in front of them, and digital transformation investments need to be looked at carefully, in terms of the opportunity cost of what other things they are missing out on. Now, to get into it a little bit more deeper, we have classified operators into three specific buckets. We call them true believers, or hybrids, or skeptics. The true believers are the operators who are at the leading edge of transformation. They have a reasonably sized investment bucket and also a reasonably sized appetite for risk, and their primary intention or the eventual destination is to change how the company is valued by the public markets. The next comes hybrids, and here the operators are more focused on how they are seen by their end customer. They are really keen to engage with them digitally and build a perception of being a digital company. Although they are not the thought leader or the first ones to embrace new digitization initiatives. They are usually the ones who would watch what true believers are doing and carefully choose and pick whatever works best for them. And finally, we have the skeptics. These are the operators who have little interest in large-scale digital transformation. They are more focused on incremental improvement. And most of the times they stumble into digital transformation out of a strategic investment that is focused on something else. So digital transformation in and of itself is of little interest, but whatever else might be a strategic priority for them may lead them to tangentially experiment with digital transformation. So now that we have these three operator types in mind, I'll just introduce what we call the pyramid for digital transformation motivation.
John, before we do that, I just want to ask a question, if you don't mind me jumping in here.
Sure.
The slide previously, categorizes service providers into three buckets, but it looks a lot like the technology adoption curve, if I'm going to kind of visualize that. Where are you, what are you seeing the shape of that curve? The majority of service providers falling heavily into one of those three areas, or are you seeing it pretty evenly dispersed across all three buckets?
It is not an even dispersion. At this point, I think it's fair to say that we have very few operators in the true believer category. AT&T, I believe, is certainly in the true believer category, and I'm just calling them out because they are part of this panel. But we see the majority of them, especially between the hybrid and the skeptic category. I think especially in the next two slides, I've tried to map out where these three categories of operators fall in our digital transformation matrix, and that would actually explain what's the key difference. So I might be able to throw some more color on this particular question, Scott, in the upcoming slide. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have virtualization, or the focus on making networks more agile and software defined. And then right after that, we have the focus on digital experience as a key motivator for investment. I must say that 4 and 5 is something that we have seen happening even right now, especially across all tiers of operators, although the leading ones tend to have a lot at stake in both these, and while the tailing ones have been careful to pick and choose more specific options within the digital experience sphere. Then after that, we'll have the focus on digital services driving a lot of investment, and this actually goes beyond just digitizing existing services, but also has a greater emphasis on providing a new breed of digital services. Stage 2 is cost transformation, which, by the way, is not the same as cost cutting. Cost transformation essentially is about a radical cost transformation that enables the operator to support the same or a greater degree of business lines at a smaller cost base, mainly through automation, AI, or other software-led technologies. And hopefully, all of these would lead the operator to the top of that pyramid, which is to become or have a valuation that is comparable to a technology company. So most technology companies have an enterprise value that's on an average in the early 20s, while for most operators it is in the mid to late single digits. So a shift in that transformation, a shift in that valuation rather, is what operators hope that they get out of the digital transformation initiatives. And that leads me to the final slide, where I actually map the different operator categories to the matrix. And going back to Scott's original question around, what separates these three categories and where is the biggest portion of operators lumped up today. So the first question, the biggest difference between the true believers and hybrids is that cost transformation phase. And it's quite more difficult than typical, improving cost efficiency or, cutting costs that we typically see in most operators today. This is essentially a behavioral change that would drive down the total OPEX on an annualized basis, and at the same time, force a significant amount of business restructuring. So there are a number of social and other business challenges that keep operators from doing this extensively, and that today is a big bottleneck. In terms of the difference between hybrids and skeptics, I think it's fair to say that it's mostly around their focus. So hybrids have a desire to become a digitized company, although they are conscious they cannot go at it full steam for a number of factors, funding certainly being one of them. The skeptics they have digital transformation on the fringes of their focus, and they are more focused on other business or strategic initiatives currently, and digital transformation often begins as an after effect rather than as a direct focus for them. I think it's fair to say that for the most part, operators fall between the hybrids and skeptics category. That's where we have the largest portion, about 70% of operators today. Some characteristics may define them as hybrid, but some others may define them as skeptics. So that's why I just lumped them between hybrids and skeptics. There are very few true believers today, and I think there's a reason for that, because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of willpower to actually cross that cost transformation phase. To just summarize, I would say that 3, 4, and 5 phases are something we would see in the short to medium term, while 2 and 1 are something that will only become mature over the long term, which is at least 5 to 7 years away.
Thanks for that, John. I think that's very insightful, and I think it helps us kind of evaluate where the industry is in terms of digital transformation overall. I want to just give Rupesh an opportunity to respond. Obviously, you've called him out here as a true believer as it relates to transformation. And Rupesh, do you have any thoughts on that? I know AT&T has been doing quite a bit and making a lot of progress in things like network virtualization, 5G deployments, IoT. So, it's what we're seeing as well. Do you have any comments to that?
Sure, absolutely. And, we have been, on this journey with a lot of kind of leadership focus, but conviction at all levels within the firm to go through our own transformation, right? And we're leading the industry. So a couple of data points. We have been sort of, public about our virtualization strategies and the journey that we're on. And we've set goals of, 75% of the AT&T global network will be virtualized by 2020. Here we are in 2018. Our objective is 65%. We have already accomplished 55% virtualized in 2017. So a lot of work, a lot of focus in terms of the leadership, the conviction, the investments are going in that space. So again, a tremendous effort within the firm, from people upskilling to adopting new technologies to building platforms and services that our customers consume and go through that transformation. Right? A couple of other data points to build upon that. Right? You talked about IoT. Again, we've been in that space for over a decade now, and kind of we're the pioneers to think beyond the traditional sort of, cell phones or mobile smartphones to, taking that concept and technologies into Internet of Things and leveraging not only the innovation that it provided, but just the whole solving for the customer challenges and the business process automation that goes with it. And, again, we have a lot of endpoints on our network rapidly growing. As you mentioned, 5G is at the turn of the corner over here. 5G is going to provide tremendous amount of new use cases that will be supported. And I think it's going to be more about the enterprise than about the consumer space, because the B2B to B2C space is going to rapidly evolve, where you have, a tremendous amount of network capability, whether it is around speed or latency or slicing of the network to create traffic flows that are unique to those use cases, right? So we're excited about that and working very hard. And last but not least is, we see 200 petabytes of data, 200 plus petabytes of data every single day on the network. So you can imagine the global scale that we have, and having to go through the virtualization and getting ready for the future was very, very important for us, and we're executing on it day in, day out. And I think, the strategy is right, the vision is right, we did it at the right time, and we're reaping the benefits already.
Rick, Microsoft has been delivering an impressive strategy to provide a carrier-grade platform for telcos. This spans everything from CRM to cloud and now telco AI. Microsoft is one of the few companies that's actually deploying real AI solutions, ones that can actually make autonomous decisions. And I know you've been working with AT&T around IoT. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with AT&T on IoT and what telco IoT means to Microsoft?
Yes, thank you, Scott. So as you mentioned, we've been working with customers like AT&T, but we've also been working with big customers throughout the world like Vodafone and Telefonica, and just general digital transformation initiatives that span their entire business. AT&T, for example, has been on a journey to becoming a software company, and this is something we've been hearing from their senior leadership like John Donovan for many years. 3 weeks ago, during the Microsoft Inspire conference, which is really our largest global partner conference that attracts over 40,000 attendees, we awarded AT&T really the highest award of the show, which was the Microsoft Global ISV Partner of the Year Award. And this was for the AT&T Asset Management Operations Center solution, which is an IoT application which they've recently rebuilt and deployed on top of our Azure cloud. It's our public cloud. And it's really amazing how AT&T's really reimagined their IT offerings, and they're starting to leverage the cloud to innovate in a more agile and more efficient way. So it's really proof that AT&T is really indeed succeeding in becoming a software company. But to answer the second part of your question, I do want to focus more on artificial intelligence, which really is a technology that's just disrupting every business on the planet. As far as how we're working with companies throughout, or service providers specifically, it's kind of interesting. The first step is really around utilizing AI to transform customer care, and it tends to be a stepping stone onto the more medium and long-term strategies for infusing AI through your organization. So we kind of see virtual agents, chatbots, for example, is kind of the face of AI. And so the business discussions tend to start around how we can leverage chatbots to really optimize customer care. And it could be really customer-facing chatbots, or it could be virtual agents that are really designed to assist customer service representatives be more efficient. We know that if you're able to deflect just a single percentage point of interactions to a lower cost intelligent channel like a chatbot, that results immediately in millions of dollars in savings per year. And often it results in happier customers as well. So it makes absolute sense to use that, again, as that stepping stone or starting point for AI. But we do have some operators like AT&T and many other innovators that are really on the fast track to leveraging AI more broadly. We're part of Acumos, so we're working with AT&T on that initiative, which is really a broader initiative as to how we can collaborate with the larger ecosystem of players in the space. And on the medium term, we see operators are now using AI for churn prediction, product recommendations, and really some more horizontal workloads like financial forecasting. And that's an area where Microsoft has a lot of experience in building our own solutions that we're now sharing with telco customers.
Thanks, Rick. So chatbots are the entry point, but you're already starting to see that expand into different areas. Pipeline's predicting by 2019 AI is going to be much more pervasive, and that's going to be something we're covering in our advanced analytics issue. But what do you see the key challenges in terms of getting across from the chatbot to customer service applications of AI and bringing it more into the operational infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a good question, Scott. And so, as you point out, I mean, we've been in the AI space for a very long time, in the decades per se. And in the last few years, we've learned a tremendous amount with regards to what works and maybe what doesn't work as effectively when you're deploying AI solutions. The biggest challenge by far is the lack of resources, human resources that are available, data scientists, AI experts, in order for us to really build and deploy these really complex platforms out. And so that's one of the areas that we counsel our telco customers with regards to where they should focus their time. The real answer is don't focus your energy and your time building the underlying AI platform that you need in order to deploy your business solutions, because the true value of AI is really around having those business challenges responded to in some meaningful way. We are all developers, and a lot of these big tech companies, we have a big number of developers that love to build plumbing. Don't let them do that because they will be spending all of your AI investments building, again, really cool platforms and infrastructure that ultimately solve no business problem. And so that I would say, focus on, again, building or solving the business problems, not building plumbing.
Thanks, Rick. That's exactly right. And I think, this is one of the emerging technologies that both John and Rupesh mentioned earlier, and there's a lot of confusion around it. So that provides some clarification. And regarding the shortage of resources, there are new companies coming to market that are addressing this problem. And Shahin, this sounds a lot like Ziotis. And I know you have an extensive background in artificial intelligence. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about AI, the application of it, its limits, ethicality, as well as how to govern what it can and should be able to do. And the flip side of that coin is that it's needed. It's needed for automation, and it's needed for collaboration across domains, between systems, and even to partner with competing third parties. Can you tell us a little bit about how blockchain is being used to increase and secure collaboration?
Thanks. So yes, when Rukesh was talking about vertical market and how they are tied together potentially in the future in order to create value, the supply chain I think is completely changed now. So we are talking about collaboration across, not only telco service providers, but also between telcos, automotive, self-driving cars, autonomous cars, healthcare, they are all connected, and as part of the digital transformation journey, I think, the supply chain will be changed too. And that's why we believe truly blockchain is allowing customers to interchange ideas, goods, digital goods, as well as, physical goods, in a whole different manner as we did in the past. So blockchain is, for us, is a really supporting factor to enable the digital supply chain.
So tell us a little bit about blockchain. What is it? How can it help? And in some of the broader ecosystem, even as it relates to AI, where does blockchain fit in?
Right. So again, if you look at different domains of interaction of us today in terms of I want to buy a good, and how do I get that from from source A to source B, whether or not this is a really a network node, network virtual service, or an application, or in the future it's going to be something we sell as a digital service. So the interaction and blockchain is per se is a very slow, used to be a slow distributed ledger, right? So it's I write something without actually interacting with someone else. I can, or in a centralized manner, I can share goods and create invoice. So the notion that today about millions of devices are in our IoT environment are creating invoices, and we have to collect those invoices and send them back to a centralized place and settle those invoices. I think that blockchain in a big picture will change that notion, allows every service provider, or ultimately every object, to be a self-settled settlement object, which means I don't have to go and collect bills and settle bills. As part of the digital journey, we will be able to make those settlements on the fly. So, if you look at, for instance, service providers within Azuri, I can buy a SD-WAN from Azuri. I can buy a SD-WAN from AT&T. So how do I decide which service do I get from which supplier? That's up to the customer. So the open telecom, or the narrative that telecom is becoming more and more open as the entire industry will change. We will see more and more probably interchange between different service providers. And it doesn't have to be a telecom service provider. It could be a digital service provider and service provider.
Thanks, Cheyenne. One last question for you. So, because we talked about blockchain and even its application in IoT, what's the role of AI in IoT? I know we've had conversations in the past, where automation is a necessity, and you guys coined a phrase called cognitive automation. Can you tell me how that fits in with AI and IoT?
Right. So, today's automation, we would call it at the level 1, which is, automating whatever task we have at hand. But in the future, there are certain aspects of life. I think analytics was mentioned by Rukesh, but also by Microsoft. We have a lot of data which we have traditionally thrown away. We use 1% of data in the past. But in order to transform also to OSS, which is the missing part right now, we have to understand, what is going on in the network, and allow, based on AI, there are certain applications like clustering, data recognition, data, analytics. That's, must have an AI, but there are other certain elements which have not been addressed right now, and that's what we're looking at with cognitive automation, or we call it no pane of glass. How to automate some of the, future challenges in the network. If you look at mobile edge computing, for instance, the first estimates are we will have about 200. We have today 200,000 towers. In future, we will have about 2 million mobile edge computing sites. So managing those sites manually, or via traditional telemetry, OSS telemetry, is no longer a choice. Is a must-have to automate those processes and manage those via AI in a very cognitive manner.
Exactly, and I really like the phrase "no pane of glass" because we're going to need to get there. But AI can help, but it's got to be done securely, and it's got to be done across domains. And I think that's where blockchain can certainly help. And that's a good segue into our next section, where we've heard about the promise of AI and how blockchain can help, but that doesn't address the massive volumes of data. And it continues to expand at an exponential rate, and we've got some key panelists that help operators and enterprises solve this problem. So my first question is to Red at Jenny Technologies. I know Jenny's been helping operators and enterprises leverage the data from their existing systems. Some people call these legacy systems, but in a lot of cases, rip and replace doesn't work. How does Jenny approach this unique problem of needing to leverage the massive data from these systems for next generation applications while keeping legacy in place?
Thank you, Scott. We have approached this from a very simple perspective. Our customers have invested tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, both in existing systems which we call legacy, just like you do. But they've also spent a great deal of money in terms of making sure that all of their key staff is fully trained up and can help them understand what's going on in the underlying network assets and then pull the data out of it. So what we've been focusing on is, first of all, leveraging that we call customer intimacy. We understand our customers pretty well. We've been with them quite a long time. We have developed the kind of relationships where we're sitting at their planning tables as they're thinking through the next set of iterative investment. And we've tried to boil this down into the model that you're seeing on the screen, which is what we call a surround and enhance. A lot of customers fall very nicely into the framework that Analysys Mason presented earlier. There are a lot of skeptics, there are a lot of hybrids, and of course there are certainly true believers. But we believe that as we have been working with those customers, they are all interested in understanding, but so far we've seen a relatively modest movement up that scale just because of the CapEx and OpEx restraints that they wish to exercise. So if you take a look at what we do, working with that legacy infrastructure, there are whole key sets of requirements that you asked the question on. You've got to do that data collection, management, distribution. So we've rolled out a software product that does that. Obviously, search, reporting, and analytics are key. Everyone is talking about artificial and machine learning. But the real conversation for a lot of our customers is, yes, I hear the buzzwords, I know what's coming, but I want to make sure that I understand exactly what it will do, and more important, how do I make sure that it does not run amok as some of the doomsday sayers in our industry are talking about. And then last but not least, whether you have no pane of glass or whatever, you still have to be able to visualize what's going on with the data in there. When we combine all that, we're very focused on really avoiding what we see as a pretty expensive and lengthy rip and replace. Our customers are really not that comfortable with it. They've got a lot of stuff already in place. What they want us to do is to make what they have work better, and that's really what we're very focused on.
Thanks, Red. Interesting. Obviously we're at a point of evolution where no pane of glass may be coming down the road in the future, but the need to visualize what you're doing is important. I'd like to just kind of open it up to a little bit of a dialogue with Shahin. Shahin, is that what you're seeing too? Is there a place for both, single pane of glass and no pane of glass, or is it an evolutionary process? And do you see one giving way to the other?
Right. Thanks. So I think where we stand today, and that's why I call it level 1 of automation. I think it's heavily still GUI driven. So you need to have a single pane of glass. That's what is reality today. But I think we have to have goals in life, and looking at again the massive rollout of mobile edge computing sites, probably no single pane of glass would help you in the future. Certainly, that's a goal we are all pursuing. But I agree, today is a single pane of glass. That's what most people are asking for.
Thanks, Shahin. Rat, I'll let you respond. I think I know your position here is that there's a place for both. But do you have anything to add?
No, I think that is exactly right, Scott. There definitely is a place for both. And we will be watching the next steps very carefully and certainly fold them into our customers as quickly as they want them to.
Right, and I know that you've been taking a lot of steps to add more machine learning and artificial intelligence into your platform to automate as much as possible with that ability to visualize as well. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold. Bill, Federos takes a slightly different approach. Is it fair to say instead of loving your legacy, Federos' mission is to shelve it?
Yes and no. So our approach is, first off, the legacy tools are there. They've been there. They work. There's no issue with that. The issue is, if you read John Abraham's white paper on the CSP to DSP transformation, the legacy tools are limited in scale. They're not agile. If you're going to start doing dynamic services, they're just not built to do it. It's multiple integration points, and the cost of ownership's going up. That being said, how do you leverage that data from the legacy tool? So our approach is to, number one, we're not telling anybody to rip and replace. What we're basically doing with customers is giving them a migration point. So they can either start in the virtualized world, which we have a tier 1 carrier today that uses us for manning basically their SD-WAN offering where it's zero touch, so it's fully automated. We have customers who are doing hybrid where they've used us to sit on top of legacy tools, provide end-to-end visibility, that single pane of glass. We do that today across the assurance platform. But what we also do is we leverage machine learning to make it actionable. What we do is take the data from the legacy tools. We have customers give us their data. It doesn't matter what the tool is, whether it's IBM NetCool, EMC Smarts, even SolarWinds. We take that data, we run it through our machine learning algorithm within our solution, and within 24 to 48 hours, we've trained to come up with use cases. So what is we're leveraging the tool to provide us that collection because the paradigm's changed. The legacy tools were built to suppress data. That's what fault management systems were built to deduplicate. Topology root cause was built to suppress. Today you need all the data. So you still need those other approaches, but you also need to take unfiltered data. Once you do that, you then have the machine learning. And you'll need the machine learning, by the way, because there's things you can't see in the legacy world that you can with event analytics and machine learning. And in the virtualized world, what we've seen, we have real-time experience with this, is where suddenly we have virtual network functions that reboot within 1 second. And I think all the panelists have been pretty clear on, there's more complexity. End user is getting easier to use applications, but for internally, there's multiple touch points. So again, that single pane of glass, we're seeing it. With us, you can start, though, we'll leverage the legacy, we can provide hybrid, and we can move you to the virtualized world, so it's literally future-proof. But again, the key thing is to leverage that legacy data to make it actionable so you can automate, within that hybrid world, leveraging machine learning. So again, our approach is we don't tell anybody to rip out anything, but we've had customers who clearly, because, they see the state of the legacy tools, again, like John mentioned in his white paper, they're 20 years old. They're not built for this new elastic services. And also, as mentioned, the applications today, you're basically looking at your legacy environment. You may be looking at a private cloud, a public cloud. There's a myriad of things you need to see. And unless you have that single pane of glass to do end-to-end visualization, correlation, and then machine learning that's actionable, all you're going to do is compound the problem over time. And again, the ROIs that we've seen, we've done this for multiple carriers, but we don't do it rip. We do it. It takes, it's a transformation. It takes, time to do it, and you do it in a mitigated risk fashion.
Yeah, and there's a future use case. I mean, I think we're really just scratching the surface. You start to put these pieces together, like IoT and the data that can be collected from these billions of devices with, things like AI and machine learning and blockchain for data sharing, and all of a sudden you're looking at a combination of collecting industrial and agricultural data, sharing that with third parties. I mean, it really is the enabler, for some of these future use cases, which are just being contemplated now.
Yeah, so we agree. I mean, the bottom line is the data it's increasing in volume. It's not decreasing. And again, the old approach of suppressing is still valid. We're not saying it's not. We still do that. But if you look at this new world, where suddenly you're looking at, as I heard before, petabytes of data. You need event analytics and machine learning to sort through that and to create actionable automation policies and notifications. And again, with us, you can basically start where you want to. You can start with, John showed that slide with, different business drivers for the carriers. Some want to cut legacy costs. We can help them with that. Some want to manage hybrid. Some are starting with virtualized. Again, we have the use case with the tier 1 carrier that we did with Ericsson, where they've started on the virtualized world. It's the first deployment in the world last year. And now they're looking to do hybrid, starting to look at legacy environments and have that end-to-end visibility. In that case, by the way, we integrate to all of their OSS, their ticketing systems inventory. We integrate into their legacy tools. But again, we can take the data from that legacy tool and leverage that to create, machine learning use cases to position them for automation in that. And again, IoT is something else extensible. The so what here is you can start with this path that we show, and we allow you to move either way. The end goal, by the way, will be eventually hybrid. you can't virtualize everything. We heard that from AT&T. They're looking at 70%. You're still going to have to manage infrastructure that's, fiber, copper, radio access networks. But again, we give you the ability to do both.
Thanks for that, and thanks everyone else for commenting on this section. But you touched on a point that I want to dive into here, and that is the need for greater agility and how that relates to operational and business support systems. These are traditional systems, but almost at the nexus of digital transformation, obviously. Customers still need to be billed accurately for their services. The network needs to be managed. And these essential systems must evolve to contend with the changing landscape. Technologies like advanced analytics, cloud, and machine learning can help. And I'd like to ask Mary, who's on our panel here, on how they're being applied. Mary, why should operators embrace these technologies, and how can they help?
Well, when I think about the use of cloud and IoT and all things AI, what I think is important at this point is to constantly remember, I think, what John from Analysys Mason mentioned, which was, what is the objective that is trying to be achieved, and what is the intention behind making any choice of how to leverage any of these technologies? I think more than anything we find consistent confusion on what is the priority. And so to use cloud as an example, we're seeing the utilization of cloud from the perspective of certainly edge and edge computing and the need to drive more assets into the cloud to support the kind of computing that's going to be needed. But yet also we're seeing the need for cloud to be used for data storage for the consumer as well as the small business and enterprise. As I look out into the future and we think about devices and the way in which devices could evolve, I recently bought a 512 gig iPad, which, at this point has a lot of storage to it. As we go into the future and we think about the opportunities for what might exist in a 5G world with the kinds of edge computing that we might have the opportunity to take advantage of and the access to cloud storage, I may not need that kind of storage in the future. My device may be less expensive, my battery utilization may be lower, because we are able to take advantage of cloud as an example of a technology that is helpful. We're speaking to operators around the world today about adding that as an additional feature and service to straight cloud storage. It's a revenue-generating model that we've seen successfully deployed. It's also an opportunity for engagement, which operators have certainly struggled with in having over time with consumers and SMBs in terms of simply being able to really deliver on a value exchange that is over and above straight connectivity, which continues to be a real challenge, is finding those incremental services that drive new value exchange and revenue. So I look at these technologies and think about the conversations that we're having where at one moment we could be talking to a head of product that is looking to augment different services to their enterprise customers or their consumer customers, and they're at the same time trying to balance what has been the mandate handed to that organization in terms of digital transformation, and how are they supposed to prioritize the investments they're making as it relates to cloud, as it relates to implementation of different IoT services. It is so important to continue to bring forward what is the business outcome and helping them drive the business case and helping them to internally prioritize. I think is perhaps the biggest challenge that we face, but I think those are, the use of cloud as an example is absolutely something that is within the reach of the operator and something that is not only just going to hit at an improved customer experience, which as was shown is one of the sort of maturity steps, if you will, but it's also getting closer to helping really transform the consumer's experience.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mary. It's true. I mean, it's one thing when we're talking about our own personal devices, but when we talk about the scale in an operator environment for things like mobile computing as well as enabling things like 5G and IoT, it's a massive undertaking that requires a significant amount of resources, and if those resources can be optimized, then we have a much more efficient ecosystem to deliver those services to customers. Let me turn the question to Matt. I mean, these new services are really changing the landscape, and there are some significant impacts to the global supply chain. How is that changing what and how billing and BSS systems work?
Great question. Transformation is really all about automation. And so if you think about the way billing works today, it hasn't changed in about 500 years. Carriers still exchange documents with customers, so they send a PDF, right, and that customer will process the PDF and load it up into their accounting system, and that's the way it works. So in 500 years, we've switched from paper to PDF. If you think about transformation, you'd want to eliminate the PDF. And I just use that as an example, but for one element, you would say, how could you automatically enter the bill into the customer's accounting system so it just shows up? Also, how would you use AI to validate that that bill is correct, that those services were indeed delivered, that it matches the contract that the people had, all of that. And then automate bill payment. So if it's okay to pay, there's a contractual obligation, then it just flows through. And then automated reconciliation. So how do you do that cash application and drive that in? So that's really looking at transformation. It's, transformation is all about a dramatic change in the form. And so thinking through how the connectedness between the customer's apps, like a NetSuite or other accounting applications, and the actual carrier systems, creating that connectivity and automation between the parties will drive a ton of value for both sides because they get cost savings. And it also will improve decision-making because you have the information that you need, or in some cases using AI to actually automate that decision-making that would have an impact on P&L. So that's, when you think about digital transformation, you really need to think deeply about automation and fundamentally, rethink the way the process works today.
Thanks. Where and how can you measure the value of digital transformation? I mean, all of this sounds great, and being able to eliminate the PDF and feed it right into customers' accounting systems as well to validate that with AI. But is there a quantifiable metric that you can use to measure the return on investment from that transformation initiative?
Certainly. There's, you can look at a couple of things. First of all, there's, any operational expense on both sides. So one of the things to drive adoption, there has to be a value proposition for your customer to engage in this new way of doing business. So there has to be, an operating expense, improvement for them. There's got to be an OpEx for the carrier as well. Typically, that's a reduction in systems costs, manual labor, those types of things. Ultimately, there's also value in decision-making. So how is the information being provided impact a decision with revenue or cost implications? And so understanding what decisions your customers make around the information you're providing them allows you to identify how you can better help them use your own services and your own products to improve their P&L. So, really understanding what decisions customers need to make and what automation you're delivering them, you can track how you're improving their OpEx as well as the use of their dollars.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. David, let me turn to you. We need a certain level of transformation at the OSS BSS level. Matt did a great job talking about that from a billing perspective. Let's talk about it a little bit from an OSS transformation perspective. How can service providers transform their OSS?
Yes, operation support systems is a rich part of the digital transformation because we need to manage and monitor the network before and during and after the transformation. Before the transformation, we have a lot of systems, right? In OSS, especially, there are hundreds or thousands of the systems. They work together and then they create a lot of interfaces. And then the network is dynamically changing. We are transforming it to be digitized. So we want it to be simplified and then be able to enable the operator to sell the services quickly and then adapt to the quick changing of the network. So based on our experience, there are several ways to do it. One is to do the top-down. We transfer the BSS first, and then in the OSS area, we transfer from service and then network layer and then element management layer. So from layer top, step by step going down. So the advantage of it is the management team can easily see the result or see the result faster. So without changing your network management layer, you already see the result in the service layer. But the problem is you are building a second floor without the first floor. So you have to put some kind of frame there, and then that kind of work most likely to be, it's not going to be used later when you transfer the network layer. So it has advantages and disadvantages. Another approach which is becoming more popular is bottom-up. So you transfer the lower layer first. You transfer the, for example, the network management layer, and you can get rid of the EMS or still keep using the EMS. And then after you're done with the MMS layer, then you go into the service layer. So you simplify the interactions or integrations between systems. You reduce the number of systems. Here you will most likely approach applying the tier and replace kind of methodology here. But however, the key part here is you need to make the customer, the operators, feel safe and reduce their pain for the transformation. Because if you remove the system that has been used for years and now you put in a new system, you don't want a dramatic change. You want them to be able to parallelly see the result, be able to compare what you are providing and what they are seeing. So that way they feel very comfortable. One day they shut down one system, the old system, and then reduce number of systems to be a very small set of the systems that make everything faster and transparent. So in order to do that, you have to learn from others and participate in a stand-up body like a TMF or like what we're going on today. We do a technical exchange and share the experiences and also share the methodology and the vision of the people, great people in this industrial. So learning from each other and then help the stand-up body to build a more standard way, a standard approach to do this OSS transformation is a great way to overcome the challenge. And with that to be done, then you can get a good internal support, because OSS transformation is very painful process. There have been some cases, big transformation going on and then failed. So up management support is very, very important. In order to get that support, and we need to be able to provide very sound reason and then approach, and then for many people involved in, they will feel painless, or at least reduce their pain. Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, David, and I feel you're absolutely right. It's a migratory approach, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So it has to be done, openly, and as we do here on Pipeline, and try to expose the technology so that individuals, enterprises, and service providers can apply that technology to their environment as it relates to them. And it does require a unique set of circumstances that need internal support. So thanks for sharing those perspectives. I want to thank David and all the rest of our presenters today, our webinar sponsors, and to all of you for attending today's webinar. We'll now open up the discussion to answer the questions we've received from our audience and go into our Q&A session. Don't forget, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can submit them using the Q&A panel on your console that's at the bottom of your screen. And don't forget that there are handouts available using the handout button on your console as well. We've got some good questions from our audience. So the first one is for Cheyenne at Ziotis, and it has to do with managing third parties in the digital supply chain. How do we get third parties involved to accept it and create a blockchain transaction?
Right, thanks. Thanks, Scott. So there are multiple layers of integration right now in terms of blockchain, and blockchain does have many facets as a new technology. I think the one we were showcasing here is the one which most of people are talking about. This is settlement, intercarrier settlement at the surface. In terms of true OSS transformation and changing, really integrating blockchain into OSS, I think that's where we are at the step one right now. So we're launching actually a new version of OSS, which is blockchain driven, which allows us to share inside out, and that's the first step. The second step is, the long term, what the customers are asking for most of the time is, how do I get rid of, for instance, just name one company, SAP. How do I do the self-settlement without having the middleman? So that requires actually the smart contract. And again, of many cases we are talking about, smart contract is not very, if you look at the API integration we are doing today, the smart contract is relatively small to implement. And this is what we see as a true digital transformation, where everybody has a authentication mechanism to get into the private blockchain. That's what we are using right now. We are using only private blockchain. We are not using public blockchain, and that's where I think the integration starts.
Thanks, Cheyenne. The next question I'm going to direct towards Rupesh at AT&T, and this has to do with creating a culture of transformation. So from AT&T's perspective, how do you embrace transformation across your organization, and how much of a requirement is that to truly evolve as an operator?
It's a great question, right? And the cultural transformation is key. At AT&T, we continue to evolve. We talked about during the session in terms of the leadership focus, the conviction, and the upskilling of the resources that we had to internally go through, where you develop programs where the team members are engaged, they have opportunities for range of education options internally, externally. We offer nano degrees from engineering schools to having very focused curriculum for software-defined networking or cybersecurity, as an example, and driving that, with multiple sort of, forums in terms of encouraging folks for that education, upskilling, giving promotional or kind of like, cool project opportunities for folks to work on. And that really sort of, prepares us to have the talent that is needed as we become sort of, prepared for the future of the company. The software-centric, it's a highly competitive, tech-focused, rapidly changing industry that we're in, and the people continue to be a very important asset to deliver on that transformation. And, last point I would share is that, one of my MBA NYU professor mentioned that culture is the glue that keeps the organization together, right? So especially in rapidly changing times and the pace of speed at which we need to move, the cultural conviction, the transformation is very important because it keeps the organization together to be ready and deliver on the next frontier. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupesh, and that's exactly right. I mean, I think there's an approach that has to be instilled into the culture, but that's got to transform from everything from the talent that you recruit through to your existing staff as well. There are two related questions here. One is, John, I'll ask you, and this is regarding the category of operators on their digital transformation journey. Do skeptics always remain skeptics? Are they reluctant to change, or are they just unable to change? And what are the motivations for operators to transform and to become digital operators?
Right. So thanks, Scott. The first question there, skeptics, will they always remain skeptics? I don't think so. To be honest, I think it's too early in the digital transformation journey for any operator to be taking up permanent positions. So things would evolve, I'm sure. And usually what happens is, operators move between those boxes when there are other external factors that's actually forcing them to. So competition it's certainly a leading factor. And we have also seen that when there is a very strong potential for a decline in financial performance, even not driven by competitions, operators move along in transforming themselves. So I certainly expect that what we have today in terms of the operators in the believers, the hybrid category, as they grow, they might directly influence some of them who are more rooted within the skeptics category. So that will change. In terms of the second question, which is the impact of transformation on staff and resources, I think Rupesh from AT&T may have answered it indirectly, but my view of it is that operator systems today have been mostly built around people, which means teams and organization structures have been entrenched. That system design was often secondary to the team structure. So the problem is, anytime a radically new technology comes along, it's challenging to absorb it effectively, because you have to be mindful of how the teams and the processes work and so on. But with digital transformation, there has been an acceleration in how operators see this, and there is also an increased urgency in transforming or wanting to transform the workforce. Obviously, this is a huge task and something that costs a lot of money, and there are no quick answers, because employees need to be reskilled, team structures need to be changed, the culture has to evolve, and so on. But and AT&T here, as Rupesh said, I think they are probably a good example. They have committed to about $1 billion in investment for retraining over 100,000 employees. There are some other operators, especially in the APAC region, who have also committed to, who have signed up with universities and so on, and helping their employees upskill. Although the scale is not as big as what AT&T is trying to do. So certainly there are a number of operators that are thinking hard and working towards fixing this problem. But I expect this to be an issue for the next few years, just because it is a fact that people needs to be upskilled, and it's also a fact that this is actually going to take some time.
Thanks, John. Rupesh, any thoughts there about the augmentation on existing resources, including staff, that digital transformation will have to operators' environments?
I agree in terms of a lot of investment needed, right? In terms of financial investment, in terms of time, resource investment. We have to constantly sort of augment the people resources with the new talent that we bring in and board. And I think what has happened, even if you look at the universities, they're pivoting to more and more kind of specialized areas, right? So data scientist is one of an example, and we have a very sort of thriving and focused group under the chief data officer that is constantly sort of bringing in new talent to augment the current resources that we have, as we continue to sort of upskill the people that are already in the roles, and then give them opportunity to expand into different roles, different responsibilities. As I mentioned before, I think even taking simple approaches like here's a new kind of cutting edge project, and then staffing it with the people who have gone through the program as a opportunity and a reward and a recognition that can further sort of keep the flywheel going. I do want to mention this is not a one and done kind of a situation. It is a journey, right? We are in the era where the transformation is taking place. Obviously AT&T has made the plunge. We have demonstrated that we are making a lot of great progress in this area, and we will continue to invest in it and continue to be on that journey from a transformation perspective, because the technology and the pace at which it is changing is very rapid. And somebody had mentioned that the moment you solve a problem, you start thinking about how do I make it better, right? So we have to be on that continuous improvement, automation, transformation, delivering the results. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupesh. So we are running a little long on time here, so I want to give the other panelists an opportunity to chime in on any of those topics or any others. Are there additional questions, or does anybody want to talk about the topics that were mentioned here? Rick, I know, the transformation isn't unique to service providers. Enterprises as well are transforming. Did you want to talk about that?
Thanks, Scott. I think everything has been covered pretty extensively. In the sense of AI and the fear around AI having a potentially negative impact on workforces, I mean, we feel that the reality is that you have to obviously take transformation seriously and ethically and look at those issues as well. But keep in mind that the same thing has been said about every major technology shift in the past 50 years. And so, you have to take a tempered look and ultimately know, yes, it will have an impact. It will be transformative, but it's ultimately going to be beneficial for all parties involved. And AT&T has mentioned the great work that they've done related to retraining and upskilling. And so that's part of it. But really, we feel that AI, honestly, at the end of the day, is really going to be more around augmenting human abilities rather than replacing them.
Go to the next question here, which is for Bill at Federos. It's regarding machine learning in software, and of course this has been a buzzword that's evolved into AI, but software providers are struggling to actually deploy actual use cases. Can you tell us a little bit more on how machine learning is incorporated into Federos' approach?
Yes. So what we've done is we've integrated it into our core product. And to your point, what we found, we basically have customers give us the data, as I mentioned before, from their legacy tools. The results have been, frankly, astounding, and I don't use that word very often, but within the first 30 days, we basically created 54 different use cases. What that means is we've taken the data, we've identified things that, again, that they didn't see. So we go back to a customer and say, you had an outage on this date, and this was the cause. In other words, it's a root cause that they didn't see before. And again, the feedback has been positive across the board. Because typically what carriers have done, and we're dealing with a lot of the tier ones, the way they've used machine learning today, or analytics in particular, has been after the fact. So we're dealing with a large managed service provider who's transforming right now. They're the ones who gave us over 1 terabyte of data. The issue for them was that they're doing the analysis afterwards, versus now we're able to do, again, I keep going back to that word actionable, which again gets that automation play and also gets into improving customer experience. So, proactively managing SLAs. But again, it's leveraging that data from the different data sources. So we're able to take that, and again, the fact is that we can train the data after running it through once. It's a complete paradigm. It doesn't take months. It takes literally 24 to 48 hours to come back and prove to them, here's what we've seen historically. Typically, we get, by the way, asked for a year's worth of data, which we get, and again, the results are just extremely powerful. We have no one tell us that, and again, I mentioned before, from low-scale tools to high-end tools that are used by the carriers today.
Thanks, Bill. I think that's all that we're going to have time for today. Thank you to everybody who's participated in this great panel discussion, including our speakers, our sponsors, again, and the attendees on today's session. Thank you very much, and if you have additional questions, you can still submit them, and our panelists will be able to respond to them. They'll be encapsulated into the final webinar, which you will be able to download from pipelinepub.com. Once again, have a great day, and thanks again for attending the webinar.